Catching lightning in a bottle once is tricky, but doing it twice in a row, well, that's near impossible. But the insane team at Hazelight Studios has managed to find a way once again. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and this is our full review of Split Fiction after beating the game and clearing every side story. Well guys, here we are again, almost 4 years later, talking about Hazelight Studios, and would you believe it, they've got another Game of the Year contender on our hands. Split Fiction is exactly what myself and Livid hoped it would be after the breakout success of It Takes Two. So here's the headline. Split Fiction is an incredible co-op game and a frontrunner to win Game of the Year. Full stop. The graphics and visual storytelling are stellar, the gameplay is more clever, immersive, and nuanced than in It Takes Two, and while the story takes more time to ramp up, it's still delivered with passion through the eyes and voices of Mio and Zoe. The game is a feast from start to finish and will go down in history as one of, if not the best co-op adventure games, creating the new standard for what cooperative games should strive to be. Most of the time, we go into a review with cautious optimism. We don't review every game that gets sent our way, and we are in fact rather selective about what games we choose to play and review purely based on our own likes and dislikes. However, in the case of Split Fiction, I think it's fair to say our expectations were high. That's what happens when a team delivers a Game of the Year and then follows it up with a game that promises to deliver on a similar idea, but even better. In Split Fiction, you play as Mio and Zoe, two writers and complete strangers that are invited to join the Raider Publishing Company after being promised a lucrative publishing opportunity. Within the first few minutes, you realize all of that is shady, and the massive global entity is actually trying to steal the ideas of every writer there by hooking them up to a crazy machine. Chaos ensues, and what happens next is pure Hazelight brilliance as both Mio and Zoe become stuck in the same machine, which forces them to work their way through two alternating worlds, one science fiction, which just so happens to be Livid's favorite setting, and one fantasy, which is mine. The entire game is grounded in the story, constantly delivering bits of exposition as you explore the two main worlds, as well as a variety of side stories which help fill in the background on our two main characters, and we strongly suggest you do those if you want the full Split Fiction experience. At the start, both Livid and myself weren't finding ourselves as invested in Mio and Zoe's overarching story. It just isn't that relatable. By comparison, It Takes Two felt grounded in something very real and emotionally charged, a couple on the verge of a divorce, forced to work through their relationship out of necessity. Maybe it's because both myself and Livid are older, and that story connects with us on a more personal level, but it wasn't until the last third of the game, where Mio and Zoe's real vulnerability started to show, did we feel connected to the characters. Split Fiction is missing a comedic foil, like Dr. Hakim, the hilarious and oft obnoxious book from It Takes Two, and instead relies on a tritagonist, Raider, the evil corpo head of Raider Publishing, to help move the story forward. He's an ass, and clearly the bad guy. We all want to see him fail, but he's far less memorable than other characters in Hazelight's games. Luckily, the voice acting is superb across the board, and once again, the small cast of voice actors brings these characters to life in such a spectacular way.
Can't you see that I'm doing society a favor? I'm the good guy here.
Anyone who wishes to pass through my lands must first prove themselves worthy. Zoe, is that you?
Oh, dear little Zoe.
As delightful as always.
Everyone will die!
What? We're all gonna die?
Oh, no, don't listen to her.
We drop in T-minus 60 seconds!
Woohoo! We did it! Come on, Zoe, grab the glitch! Suck it, Raider! Come on! Yeah.
For the rest of this review, we're going to talk about the gameplay, which is some of the best and most clever action we have ever experienced, and that's saying something given our combined 30 plus years of gaming. Split Fiction is a co-op adventure game, and unlike It Takes Two, both myself and Livid agree that it's much more challenging than its predecessor. In It Takes Two, you could most likely guide a lesser skilled player through some of the more complicated moments, but in Split Fiction, I truly believe that's not possible. Game mechanics and intense timing are often layered in such a way that I don't know if a more casual gamer could figure it out. A perfect example of this is during a later section of the game where you're both controlling dragons and you need to get a ball from one location to the next. Only one player can manipulate the ball by bashing it, while the other has to time activating platforms as it precariously rolls down. Even a couple seconds off and the entire puzzle resets. This less generous timing is definitely felt here and in many other challenges, especially as the game progresses. Mio and Zoe often have completely different capabilities, so you're reliant on one another to solve environmental puzzles and even some combat challenges, and after beating the game, we can confidently say it is a big step up in terms of difficulty. That being said, the game's respawn mechanic is incredibly forgiving, so I don't want the increased challenge to dissuade would-be duos from checking out the game, because you'll absolutely regret not playing it. Once Mio and Zoe get trapped in Raider's machine, the adventure truly begins, and almost immediately, things go off the rails. For the most part, you'll bounce back and forth between Zoe's fantasy worlds and Mio's science fiction ones, and each time you enter a new chapter of the game or a side story, you're introduced to completely new mechanics. One of the most impressive things about Split Fiction is how the majority of the game is built around 3D platforming, which you do for about 90% of the adventure. During this time, other mechanics layer on, manipulating and enhancing the platforming in different ways. Here's just a small sampling of some of the co-op mechanics that you'll experience throughout various points within the game. At one point, you're cyber ninjas with access to a gravity sword and whip that can manipulate the environment. You're also shapeshifters at one point that can transform into a giant ape, water dragon, tiny fairy, or ent, as you use each of them to solve environmental puzzles, tapping into the strengths of each form. Then at another point, you're cyber soldiers with access to dual laser guns that can only interact with specific colored objects in the world. And then finally, later on, you're dragon riders that must learn to master their different dragons, one of which can spit acid and fly, the other that can roll around like a wrecking ball and climb vertical structures. Now that's just a taste of what you get to experience in the 16+ hour adventure. Just as you're getting comfortable with one set of mechanics, something within the game shifts, and Hazelight is brilliant at this. Seriously, the level designers at Hazelight might just be the best in the industry at this point. It's one of the only games that I've played, other than It Takes Two and Paper Mario, that manages to shift perspectives mid-action this masterfully, essentially changing the genre on the fly. You could be exploring in a 3D environment 1 minute, the next, the entire world changes perspective, and you're now navigating a side-scroller, an isometric, or even a Crash Bandicoot-style leg of the journey where you're running towards the camera. This isn't a one-and-done occurrence either. In fact, Hazelight does this so often that almost every major portion of the game will see players dealing with multiple perspectives. This really comes to a head during the last hour of the game, and while I don't want to spoil any of that for you, I will say that the final chapter is one of the most unique, enjoyable, and exhilarating parts of any game I have ever played, and Livid agrees. Now, it's easy to compare Split Fiction to It Takes Two because they're built on the same co-op adventure framework. But one thing I don't want to undersell is just how amazing the worlds look in Split Fiction. Dragon kingdoms, wacky farms, dystopian neo-metropoli, fey glens, crumbling space stations, abandoned cities, the list goes on and on. Some of the worlds that you experience for less than 30 minutes in Split Fiction are more detailed and immersive than entire other games that we've played. It's a bold statement, but it's entirely true, and as you're ziplining through each world, you can really appreciate everything the environmental team has cooked up. These aren't just pretty backgrounds either. Because of the way that you move through each setting, you're often seeing the world multiple times from different perspectives. The technical challenge is immense, but the visual immersion is second to none. At multiple times during our playthrough, Livid would make a comment or just audibly say, "Wow, what the hell," over voice comms, and I felt the same way. One location that really stood out to both of us was the Dragon Kingdom towards the end of the game. We're navigating ancient ruins high above the clouds, but within the shadow of a massive dragon egg that an ancient peoples built a kingdom around. It invokes some serious Jade Empire vibes with the high fantasy dialed up to 11. You also can't believe the scale of some of these worlds, some of which, like I said before, you only spend around a half an hour in. It's incredible, and just goes to show how much Hazelight cares about their game to create these types of environments that players will remember for a long time. One thing that Split Fiction does differently than It Takes Two is side content. In the latter, there were a number of mini-games that players could find and enjoy for a few minutes. Those still exist in Split Fiction, but they've expanded beyond just mini-games to also now include a number of Easter eggs which pay homage to other popular games and series. Our favorite was, of course, running across this conveniently located bonfire, which, as you know, is a tribute to the Dark Souls series, but that's just one of many. However, outside of these micro moments, Hazelight introduces something called side stories, which are entirely optional adventures that take you through wildly different parts of Zoe and Mio's creativity. Some of these are actually insane, and there are two that really stand out to both Livid and myself. The first is The Farm, where you play as two pigs with magical powers. You'll stretch and fart your way to the end only to meet a rather gruesome, yet hilarious fate. No spoilers here. Now, from Livid's perspective, he really enjoyed the train heist side story, which combined some intense aerial maneuvering with some challenging 3D platforming, all while chasing down a runaway sci-fi train. I mentioned the environments the team created for the two main worlds and how impressive they are, but now consider that the team did the same with each of these side stories, plus created completely unique mechanics for each of them. And yeah, it's damn impressive. Another one of these side stories had Livid and myself competing in an SSX Tricky style snowboard race, points and all. There were a couple hundred more explosions in the Split Fiction version, but it was still just as enjoyable as I remembered when I was a kid, landing insane combinations of tricks while competing against my friend. In my opinion, these side stories are damn near perfect, and on multiple occasions, Livid and I both wish they would last longer. That's how well designed they are. Some are definitely better than others, but almost all of them have at least one major memorable moment. They also act as really nice breakpoints between the longer main story adventures. These aren't tedious by any stretch, but mentally they can be exhausting because you're constantly thinking and acting on top of the frequently changing perspective. Side stories offer you a bit of an off-ramp while also giving the developers a ton of creative freedom to do something wildly different within the constructs of the game. After 16 hours of relentless sci-fi and fantasy adventures, grueling boss fights, and enough environmental puzzles to make your head spin, Livid and I walked away from Split Fiction thinking one thing: wow. Hazelight Studios has once again managed to capture lightning in a bottle and create a game so different, so immersive, and so bold that I'd be shocked if it doesn't go down in gaming history as not only one of the top games of all time, but the new gold standard for co-op experiences. We both enjoyed it so much that we're strongly considering playing through it a second time as the opposite characters because of how different those individual experiences are designed. It's been an absolute joy to play this game, and while we always recommend you watch multiple reviews before buying, I can promise you without a shadow of a doubt, you're not going to be disappointed. And just a reminder, you only need to buy one copy of the game to play this with a friend because of the Friend Pass that allows you to share your copy with a co-op partner, regardless of if they have the game or not. Friends, I hope you enjoyed our review of Split Fiction. If you want more in-depth gaming reviews in your feed, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.